The first question from the community is Raphael asks, he says, what's the best way to protect your game from game idea or intellectual property from clones that hit the App Store? And is there something you can do beforehand or something that you can do after?
Sure. So that's a very broad question. And it has a not so satisfying answer and some somewhat satisfying answers. Let me first say, before we start diving into answering specific questions and me sort of giving some thoughts, I am required to give the standard disclaimer as an attorney. It's a real disclaimer, which is that this is not legal advice. I don't know anything about your specific scenarios. It's not creating an attorney-client relationship. Don't run out and act on it and think this is the be-all and end-all. But I'm happy to answer questions about general hypotheticals and give sort of some direction. And I hope it's helpful as sort of a starting point. But a lot of these, the answer is going to be, here's sort of what you need to know, but it's very complicated. And in this scenario, you probably need to talk to a professional. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer up front. But to move into the question, so the first thing to understand is that the idea behind a product or a game or an app, the core idea is not necessarily protectable by intellectual property. But portions of it may be. It's possible for software or business methods to be protectable by patent. But I'm not going to go into that because, to be perfectly honest, for small developers, it's almost never the right move to be going after a patent. I mean, if you have $20,000, $30,000 in your pocket and you want to spend 2 years getting it and it still maybe doesn't protect what you think it does, it makes sense in certain contexts, but often is not the case. So that's patent. Under copyright, which is a separate type of intellectual property, a lot of things are protectable, but abstract ideas are not. And the problem is that the cool idea that you had in the shower that is the inspiration for the game or the app is the very thing that you can't protect on its own. What you can protect are all the things that you set down in a fixed medium, meaning the actual code as written, the art assets, the UI. If it's a game, and say it's a narrative game, all the dialogue, all the motion capture, voice acting, the sound, all of those things are protectable by copyright. So all the pieces that go into making the game are protectable, but the core idea, and I keep using games, but there was recently just a case that reaffirmed this, but the mechanics, for instance, the rules of your game, not protectable. So Candy Crush, right? There are a million match 3 games that are basically Candy Crush. They can't protect the idea of match 3 game. But if you made one that used the exact same colors, the exact same icons, everything structured exactly the same, then you start to get to a point where you have a really close copy versus a clone. So that's the bad news, which is that a lot of times if someone reskins your game and it's effectively the same features and the same mechanics, but all that it's arranged slightly differently and all the graphics and the sounds are different, they haven't really infringed your copyright probably. So the question is, what can you do? It depends on how close it is. So if it's a really close copy and a lot of the graphics are very similar, then you do potentially have a copyright case. Practically speaking, copyright cases are very expensive. So what you're talking about really is trying to assert your rights while really knowing that you're not probably going to end up in federal court because that's very expensive, tens of thousands of dollars, and you're not guaranteed to win. So a couple of things you can do. On the copyright front, which is, again, the copyright is your content, right? The artistic stuff. And I make that distinction because we're going to talk about trademark, which gets confused with it. But the copyright content, you can send the couple of things you can do. You can send a cease and desist letter, either on your own or with the help of an attorney, which usually I call like a nastygram, although they don't have to be nasty. I would say from my experience, depending on who is doing the infringing, you may want to consider sort of the nice, friendly, hey, we're all in this together, but my lawyer said I have to send this, etc. If it's some company that's clearly just into cloning things quickly, making bucks for a week and then going away, then yeah, be nasty. So that's one thing. You can also send what's called a Dmca takedown notice, which sometimes has a bad reputation because they can be used on either side by anyone. But basically, it says it's a formalized method, and Apple, Google, Steam, all the big distributors, YouTube, they have procedures for this. And but basically, it's a form letter that says, I am the copyright holder. You, content hoster, are hosting something that includes my protected copyrighted material, and I didn't authorize it. Please take it down immediately. And I am, signing an affidavit that says I really am the holder. They'll take it down. Then you start a process of proving it, and the other person can say, oh, no, we actually think they're not the holder and whatever. If it's someone who's basically just trying to rip you off, they'll probably just go away. That can end up being a game of whack-a-mole, which is why ultimately there isn't a silver bullet, and I'm sorry. There's no magical way to just the secret code you put in and all the infringers go away. But that's sort of the more practical thing you can do. And you threaten going to court, but chances are, unless a huge amount of money is involved, your app's making $1 million a year. Yeah, absolutely. It's worth going to court. But if it's not, then the costs of enforcing your rights may be more than what you're going to get back. One last little bit on the copyright thing. If you think you may need to threaten or end up going to court, you should go and register your copyright. You do not have to register your copyright with the Copyright Office in order to own it. It's not compulsory. The fact that you coded it, that you saved it, that you created it, that means that you own the copyright by default under U.S. copyright law. But if you register it, and it's very simple, it's I think $65. There's a form. You can either have an attorney help you, or you can probably figure it out, through their site. You want to do that once you release it, or at least before you sue someone, because it gives you basically some extra benefits if you end up in court. It lets you sue for more money. It gives you presumptions in your favor, and all that translates into a scarier letter that makes it more likely that they're going to get scared and stop infringing. That's what you can do, basically. If the problem is not as much that they're copying the game, but they're using a similar name or a similar icon, then you're talking about trademark infringement.
Okay.
Most of the practical things are the same for that. A letter, or it's not a Dmca takedown, but Apple, all of them, they have similar procedures. So again, email or contact the people hosting it, and then try and contact the people doing the infringing.